reading The Mouse in the Matza Factory. Hi, we're reading The Mouse in the Matza Factory. Once there was a little mouse who lived in a wheat field in the country. One day, men came and built a fence around the wheat field. Every day they watched over the growing wheat. They watered the field, pulled the weeds, and waited for the wheat to ripen. The little mouse watched too. The little mouse wondered what was so special about this wheat. When the wheat was ripe, the men cut it down. They worked carefully, making sure to keep the wheat dry. They tied it in bundles and loaded it into a wagon. The little mouse decided to follow the wheat. Soon the wagon arrived in the mill. The little mouse poked around until he found a hole in the bottom of the door. He crept inside. Huge grinding wheels were crushing the wheat into fine flour. The miller carefully poured the flour into sacks and loaded them into a truck. The little mouse jumped aboard the truck and hid among the sacks, wondering where the truck would take them. They drove for a long time. Then they left the country with its open fields and came to the city. The little mouse peeked out. He saw tall buildings, he saw crowds of people, he heard the noise of cars and trucks on the street. At last, the truck stopped in front of an old building. Workers came to unload the sacks of flour. Quickly and quietly, the little mouse jumped down and followed. An inspector stood at the door, checking to see that each flour sack was dry and tightly closed. The little mouse was afraid he would be discovered, so he climbed up to the window ledge, squeezed through the crack, and hid behind the clock. Here he saw a large room with many people. They were all very busy. In one area, workers were unloading the sacks of flour. In another place, they were bringing in buckets of water, and in the middle was a man with a mixing bowl. When the mixing man called out, the flour man scooped a cup of flour from the sack, reached through a little window, and dumped the flour into the bowl. When the mixing man called out again, the water man filled his pitcher with water, passed it through a window, and poured the water into a bowl. The mixing man worked very quickly, mixing the flour and water into lumps of dough. The little mouse watched. He wondered what was so special about this dough. Let me go back to the last page. The mixing man brought the dough to another area where many people stood at a long table. He gave a piece of dough to each person. They were quickly rolling the dough into circles. I wonder what they're making. The circles were passed to another table where a woman poked holes in with a special tool. She lined up the circles on a rack near a brick oven. The baker slid the circles into the oven, and minutes later they were crisp and brown. A delicious smell filled the room as he took them out of the oven and placed them on a rolling cart. There's the special oven. All of a sudden, a bell rang. The people began to clean their workplaces. They scrubbed the tables, sanded down the rolling pins, and washed and dried the bowls. When they were finished, the mixing man reset the clock and called out for more flour and water. The little mouse couldn't resist the delicious smell. He followed the cart into a room where people were packing the baked circles into boxes and tying them with string. Families were standing in line to buy the boxes. He hopped onto the counter to take a peek. This is what he read. Golden matza. This matza is made of wheat, which has been watched from the time of harvest through the time of baking. That's right, the little mouse thought. I watched this matcha. I watched it from the time the wheat began to grow in my wheat field, and I watched it being harvested. I watched it being ground into flour, and I watched it being mixed into dough. I watched it being baked into matzah. The little mouse felt very important. He decided it was time to return to the country. Soon more wheat would be planted, and he wanted to be home in time to watch it again. The end.